Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling a challenge that, well, so many of you who are learning English face. How do you stop sounding like you're speaking textbook English?
Yeah, and start sounding, well, just more like yourself, more natural, more fluent.
The exact
That's the crucial mission for this deep dive. We've been given some fascinating source material that really zeroes in on this exact problem. And it takes on that common belief, that myth almost, that you have to pack your bags and live in an English-speaking country to ever achieve that truly natural flow.
Right, because let's be honest, for most people that's just not realistic, is it?
Right?
So this source says pretty emphatically, actually, you absolutely can train your ears.
You can.
You can copy those natural patterns, and you can significantly boost your fluency right where you are.
It's less about where you are geographically
Yeah.
and much more about how you focus your learning, how you approach it.
Exactly. And the core aha moment this source highlights is that realization that, natural fluency isn't solely about having a massive vocabulary or mastering every single grammar rule.
No, those are foundational. Yes, absolutely. But there's this whole other vital dimension. It's about the music of the language, the rhythm, the tone, the stress, how words link together and sometimes, well, kind of disappear.
It's like learning the notes and scales is important, right?
Yeah.
But to truly play a song beautifully, you need the tempo, the dynamics, the expression.
That's it.
You need to feel the rhythm.
A perfect analogy. When you start integrating those elements, you move from sounding like you're carefully constructing each sentence
Right, like building with bricks.
to sounding like you're participating in a fluid, spontaneous conversation. You sound more comfortable, more confident, more genuinely you.
And the source material we're diving into today provides a clear roadmap, doesn't it? Like a practical guide on how to develop these skills.
Yeah. It really does. It outlines specific techniques, dedicated listening for these subtle sounds, active copying strategies, building a library of real-life phrases.
And importantly, identifying and steering clear of some common traps learners fall into.
Exactly. Our goal in this deep dive is to take that roadmap and unpack each stage with much more detail. We'll go beyond the initial points, provide more extensive examples, explore the why behind the techniques,
Right.
and give you truly actionable insights that you can begin applying right away to change how you hear and, crucially, how you speak English.
Ready to stop just hearing and start listening differently.
Let's do it.
Let's unpack this, beginning with that fundamental skill, the art of observation and deep listening.
Okay, so part one in the source material is absolutely foundational. It stresses something that might sound simple, but it's profoundly effective.
Yeah.
You need to go beyond just hearing the individual words.
Right.
You need to consciously observe how native speakers are talking.
Okay, observe how they speak. What does that really mean in practice? Because you're right, most learners are already listening to podcasts, watching movies, trying to practice.
Sure.
But how do you shift from just passive hearing to active observation?
Well, typically, when learners listen, their primary focus is on understanding the meaning, right? Picking out vocabulary they know, or maybe checking if they understand the grammar
And
structure.
comprehension first.
Observing shifts that focus. It shifts it to the sound itself, to the features of the spoken language that often aren't written down. And the source pinpoints a few critical areas to tune your ear to.
And the first one mentioned is tone and intonation. Let's break that down.
Absolutely. First, let's just clarify. Tone often refers to the overall feeling or attitude conveyed by the voice. Is it friendly, serious, sarcastic, excited, calm?
Got it. The feeling behind the words.
And intonation is more like the melody of speech, the rise and fall of the voice pitch over phrases and sentences. The tune.
Why are these so important then? The source emphasizes their impact.
Well, as the source highlights, intonation and tone are incredibly powerful. They convey meaning, and they heavily influence how you are perceived.
Yeah.
You could use grammatically perfect words, but the wrong tone or intonation can completely change the message. Or it can make you sound, well, robotic, maybe disinterested, or even unintentionally rude.
Wow. Okay, give us some concrete examples. How does intonation specifically change meaning or feeling?
Okay, let's take a common question the source might point to. Something simple like, how are you?
Okay.
If I say that with a flat, downward intonation, especially on the last word, like, how are you? Downward fall. It sounds like a perfunctory greeting, almost like a statement rather than a genuine question.
Yeah, it sounds like you don't really care about the answer.
Exactly. There's no warmth there. It could even sound a bit suspicious in some contexts, like, okay, tell me, how exactly are things with you? A bit interrogative.
Right, like an interrogation, yeah, not a friendly check-in.
Precisely. Now, contrast that with saying it with a friendly rising intonation, particularly maybe on R or U. How are you? Rise on R. Or how are you? Rise on U.
Ah, I hear the difference. Much warmer.
Yeah, that rising pitch makes it sound warm, welcoming, and genuinely curious about the other person's well-being. The words are identical, but the intonation shifts the entire meaning and feeling.
So the emotional weight is carried by the voice pitch, not just the words themselves.
Exactly. And native speakers use intonation constantly for emphasis, too. Think about the sentence, I didn't take your book. Simple sentence, right?
Okay.
But listen to how the meaning changes when I stress different words. If I stress take, I didn't take your book. What am I implying?
That you didn't perform the action of taking. Maybe you borrowed it or someone else took it.
Right. Now, if I stress I didn't take your book.
Okay, now it sounds like you weren't the one, but maybe someone else did. You're pointing the finger away from yourself.
Precisely. And if I stress I didn't take your book.
Ah, maybe you took someone else's book. Or maybe your own book. It specifies which book wasn't taken.
Exactly. Same exact words, entirely different focus, all conveyed just through which word I push with my voice, which syllable gets the main stress.
That is a powerful demonstration.
Yeah.
Wow. So active observation isn't just hearing, I didn't take your book. It's hearing, I didn't take your book, and noticing that vocal emphasis, that stress.
Yes, you're listening for that vocal contour, the peaks and valleys in the pitch, and you should also listen for the typical patterns that signal the end of a thought or a sentence.
Like how statements usually go down and questions go up.
Generally, yes. Native speakers typically use a final fall in intonation for statements. It's raining outside. Definite fall. And a final rise for yes-no questions. Is it raining outside?
Yeah.
Clear rise. Practice identifying these basic patterns in speech you hear every day.
Okay, so we're tuning our ears to tone and intonation. What's the second key feature to focus on from the source?
Rhythm. This is another major characteristic of spoken English that often trips up learners. English is classified as a stress-timed language.
Stress-timed. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
What this means is that stressed syllables tend to occur at roughly equal intervals of time, like beats in music. And the unstressed syllables in between, they get compressed or shortened to fit into that rhythm.
Unlike syllable-timed languages where maybe every syllable gets roughly the same amount of time.
Precisely. Many languages like Spanish, French, or Mandarin, for example, are more syllable-timed. In English, this stress timing creates that characteristic bouncy or musical feel. Da-dum, da-dum-doom, da-da-dum-doom.
Okay.
Learners often carry the rhythm of their native language into English, maybe giving roughly equal weight or time to every syllable or word, and this makes their speech sound a bit choppy or monotonous to a native ear.
Like trying to play a syncopated jazz piece with the metronome strictly on every single beat. It just doesn't swing.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Let's take a simple sentence. I want to go to the store. In natural English rhythm, the main stress falls on the important content words want, go, store.
Right, to the meaning words.
Yeah. The little function words like to and the are less important and get reduced, squashed. So a learner might say, I want to go to the store, giving full time and value to each word.
Very clear, but maybe a bit robotic.
A bit, yeah. A native speaker would likely say something more like, I want to go to the store, significantly shortening those unstressed words to and the.
Want to becomes wanna. Go to the becomes go to the. Okay, I hear it.
So it's not just which words are stressed, but how quickly and lightly the unstressed words are passed over.
They get shorter, faster.
Exactly, and their vowel sounds often reduced to that weak neutral sound called the schwa.
Ah, the schwa.
Mm-hmm.
The most famous sound nobody explicitly teaches you at first. Can you define that a bit more clearly for us?
Sure. The schwa sound is basically that lazy, unstressed vowel sound. It sounds like You hear it in the A in about, the E in the, when it's before a consonant, the I in pencil, or the O in common.
It's everywhere.
It's the most common vowel sound in English precisely because so many unstressed syllables reduce down to it. Hearing it and eventually producing it is really key to sounding natural and getting that English rhythm right.
So how can you practice hearing this rhythm?
A good trick is to actually tap out the rhythm as you listen to someone speaking. Just tap your finger only on the stressed syllables, the main beats. You'll start to feel that regular pulse.
Okay, tap out the beat. I like that. So tone, intonation, and rhythm, including identifying the schwa. What's the third major feature of observation from the source?
Connected speech. This is a big one. This is where words aren't pronounced as separate, distinct units like beads on a string. Instead, they flow together, they blend sounds across word boundaries.
Okay.
The source correctly points out that this is a major feature of natural fluent speech.
Why does this happen? Is it just people talking too fast?
Speed is definitely a factor, yeah. But it's primarily about physical efficiency, as the source implies. It's simply easier and faster for our mouths, our articulators, to glide smoothly from the end sound of one word to the beginning sound of the next, rather than making a full stop and starting again for each word.
Like smoothing out the bumps.
Exactly. It makes speech flow more easily.
And the source gives some classic examples of this, right?
It does. It mentions linking, which commonly happens when a word ending in a consonant sound is followed by a word starting with a vowel sound. The final consonant sound kind of jumps over and links onto the start of the next word.
Okay, give me an example.
Think, get out. We don't usually say get paws out. It flows together. Get out. The T sound at the end of get connects smoothly to the ow sound at the start of out.
Get out, right. I hear it.
Or pick it up. It becomes pick it up. The K sound links to it, and the T sound from it links to up. Pick it up.
Wow. Okay, when you break it down like that, I realize I probably hear this constantly without consciously noticing how it's happening.
You do. And then there's elision or reduction, where sounds actually get dropped or changed or combined to make pronunciation easier or faster. The source gives some very common American English examples you hear constantly.
Like,
Going to frequently reduces to gonna. Want to becomes wanna.
yes, gonna and wanna. The classics, these are so ubiquitous in casual speech, aren't they? But yeah, if you only learned the full forms in a textbook, they'd be hard to catch at first.
Totally incomprehensible sometimes. The source also provides excellent examples like, what are you doing? Reducing to what you're doing. I don't know, becoming the very, I don't know.
Okay, let's pause on what you're doing for a second, because that one seems like a masterclass in connected speech and reduction, all rolled into one phrase.
It really is. You've got multiple things happening there. You have linking, the T sound at the end of what links to the A sound of R.
What-o.
Kind of. Then you have reduction. R often reduces to just a schwa sound, or maybe an A sound, so what?
Okay.
Then you have assimilation and reduction with U following that T sound. U often reduces to ya, but when ya follows a T sound, the T and the Y sounds can blend together to make a chi sound.
Like 2 plus ya.
Exactly. So what plus R plus U becomes wacha. Sometimes if the preceding sound is voiced, like a D, it might become wacha. Depends a bit.
Go-cha.
And then doing often drops the final G sound in informal speech, becoming doing. So the whole phrase, what are you doing, morphs into what ya knowin'?
What ya doing? That's a fantastic explanation of how those sounds actually change and blend. It's not just random mumbling. There's a phonetic logic to it.
There is. And the source examples, like, gonna wanna what you doing, I don't know. They're really just the tip of the iceberg for common reductions, especially in American English. You should actively listen for others, too.
Like what?
Gotta reducing to gotta, like in I've gotta go.
Gotta.
Kind of reducing to kinda. It's kind of cold today.
Kind of.
Sort of to sorta. He's sort of shy.
Sort of.
Because often just becomes, 'cause. I did it 'cause I wanted to. Questions, too. Did you becoming did ya? Like, did you see that?
Did you?
Would you becoming would ya? Would you like some tea?
Would.
Or even things like, is he becoming icy? Icy
Like
coming.
ice. Wow.
And tell him becoming tell him I called.
Tell them. Okay, now I understand why fast-spoken English can feel like a completely different language sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not just the speed. It's all these subtle connections and reductions and sound changes.
Exactly. And this is why, as the source really implies, learning these isn't just about sounding more natural yourself. It's absolutely crucial for comprehension.
Good point.
If you're only listening for the full, perfectly pronounced, written forms of words, you're going to miss huge chunks of what people are actually saying in everyday conversation.
So how do we translate this understanding of observation into, like, actionable listening practice, as the source suggests? What should you actually do?
Well, the source gives us a great method. Listen to short clips multiple times, but with a specific focus each time.
Okay.
First, listen for the overall meaning, just like you normally would. Get the gist. Then, go back and listen again, but only for tone and intonation patterns. Where does the pitch rise or fall? What's the feeling? Then listen again, specifically for the rhythm. Try tapping it out where the stress beats. Feel the pulse.
Okay, Third pass, rhythm.
Then listen a fourth time, focusing intently just on connected speech. Where do words link together? Where do you hear sounds reducing or disappearing, like gonna or wanna or whatcha?
So isolate the features. Don't try to hear everything at once.
Yes, exactly. Train your ear piece by piece. It's much less overwhelming. And vary your sources. Well, news reports or documentaries might be clearer, may be good for identifying basic intonation patterns and major stress points. But things like sitcoms, reality TV shows, or casual interviews and podcasts, they are absolute gold mines for hearing natural reductions, linking, and informal phrasing.
Right, because it's closer to how people really talk.
Exactly. And movie scenes can be great for hearing strong emotional tones and varied rhythms. The key is focused, repetitive listening on these specific sound features.
Okay, so we've trained our ears to hear the music of English. The next logical step, as the source outlines, is to train our mouths to produce that music. This moves us to part 2, copying from muscle memory, using the shadowing method.
Ah, yes, shadowing. This is where the rubber meets the road, really. The source calls shadowing a powerful technique, and honestly, it's hard to overstate how effective it can be for bridging that gap between just understanding the sounds and actually producing them naturally.
It's not just an intellectual exercise then.
Not at all. It's physical training for your vocal apparatus, your tongue, your lips, your jaw, your vocal cords. Just like the source's gym analogy.
I love that analogy. You're building muscle memory for speaking, not just knowing the rules of speaking in your head.
Precisely. You're training your mouth and your whole system to produce the sounds, the rhythms, the intonation patterns almost automatically without having to consciously think about every little detail.
So walk us through the step-by-step process described in the source. How do you actually do shadowing?
Okay. Step 1. Choose a short audio clip. The source suggests TV, podcasts, or YouTube. Find something you genuinely enjoy listening to, maybe 30 seconds to a couple of minutes long, is plenty to start.
Okay.
The key, as the source points out, is to choose material where you can clearly hear the speaker, and which is slightly challenging but not overwhelmingly fast. You don't want to start with something impossible that just leads to frustration.
Good point. Choose something achievable, especially at first.
Step 2. Listen to just one sentence, or even a very short phrase from the clip. Then pause the audio and repeat it out loud.
Okay. Listen, pause, repeat.
But the crucial part here, as the source implies, is to try and repeat it exactly. You're not just saying the words, you're trying to mimic the speaker's speed, their intonation curve, the ups and downs, the stress on the words, and any linking or reductions you notice during your focused listening practice.
So this isn't just repeating the words for meaning, it's mimicking the sound of the words as they are spoken naturally in that context.
Yes, exactly. You're trying to capture the prosody of the utterance, that whole package of rhythm, stress, and intonation that gives it its natural shape and meaning.
Yeah.
Now, step 3 is the core shadowing technique itself.
Okay.
Play the audio clip again, but this time you speak at the same time as the native speaker. You're aiming to be like their shadow or maybe an echo, following just milliseconds behind them, mimicking their voice as closely as possible in real time.
Whoa. Speaking simultaneously. That sounds incredibly difficult. My brain feels like it would freeze trying to listen, process, and speak all at the same time.
It is challenging at first, no doubt about it, but that's actually part of why it works so well. You're not meant to be thinking about grammar rules or finding the right vocabulary in this stage. Your analytical brain is sort of bypassed. You are purely focusing on the physical act of producing the sounds you are hearing as you hear them. This forces your vocal muscles to work in new ways, maybe ways they aren't used to, and it builds that automatic response, that muscle memory we talked about.
Okay, let's use that classic example from the source material, Ross from Friends saying, "We were on a break."
Ah, perfect example, because it's so emotionally charged, right? Imagine a learner who knows the words. They might say it quite neutrally. We were on a break.
Grammatically correct, understandable.
But it completely lacks the natural rhythm, the specific intonation, and especially the emotional force of the original line.
Right, because Ross delivers it with this intense frustration and very specific emphasis.
Absolutely. If you listen to that clip, which the source encourages you to do, you hear he heavily stresses we, and especially break. There's a specific frustrated tone, a really dramatic intonation contour, maybe a big rise on break followed by a sharp fall. We were on a break. You can hear the exasperation.
So shadowing this specific line isn't just repeating the words "we were on a break." It's about trying to channel that energy and replicate that exact sound and feeling.
Exactly. In step 2, listen, pause, repeat. You'd listen to that short clip, pause, and try to repeat it, maybe even exaggerating the stress and intonation a bit. We were on a break, aiming for that same feeling of exasperation.
Okay.
Then in step 3, you'd play the clip again and try to say we were on a break at the exact same moment and with the same sound pattern as Ross. This physical practice of matching the sound, the rhythm, the feeling, that's the key.
And the idea is the more you do this kind of practice, the more natural those sounds and rhythms start to feel when you're speaking on your own later.
That's the power of muscle memory. It becomes less about consciously trying to apply rules. Okay, I need to stress this word and reduce that vowel, and more about just doing what feels right because you've physically trained your voice and ears to work together in that way.
Okay, but what if you find it really difficult? Like, what if you just can't keep up during the simultaneous shadowing part? Step 3.
Yeah, that's a very common challenge, especially when you're starting out. The source advises choosing material that's slightly challenging, which implies it shouldn't feel impossible. So if you're struggling significantly, the first step is just to reduce the difficulty.
Oh.
Find speakers who talk a bit more slowly, or start with even shorter clips, maybe just 3 or 4 words, or a very short sentence fragment. Also, spend more time on step 2, the listen, pause, repeat step. Really focus on getting the mimicry accurate in that stage before you even attempt the simultaneous shadowing of step 3. Build up gradually.
Okay, start smaller, slower if needed. What if you're having trouble hearing or reproducing specific sounds or maybe those tricky reductions we talked about?
That's where the deep listening practice from part 1 becomes absolutely essential. Go back to that specific sentence or phrase where the tricky part is. Listen to it multiple times. Use software or apps that let you slow it down without changing the pitch, if possible, or just loop that small section over and over.
Really zoom in on the problem sound.
Exactly. Try to isolate that linking sound, that reduction, that schwa vowel. Use the pause and repeat method, step 2, to focus on just reproducing that specific tiny sound or that tricky transition accurately before you try putting it back into the full sentence again. And remember, consistency over perfection, especially in the beginning, is crucial. Short, repeated practice sessions are much better than one long, frustrating marathon session.
That makes sense. What other types of short, punchy lines might be good for this kind of focused shadowing practice, beyond the friend's example, something memorable?
Oh, definitely. Think of famous movie quotes or maybe viral video phrases or even just memorable lines from a favorite TV show or a speech you admire. The best ones are often short. They usually have a strong emotional tone and a very distinct, memorable rhythm and intonation pattern.
Can you give a few examples?
Sure, things like, "You can't handle the truth," from the movie A Few Good Men. Lots of stress, intensity, a very clear rhythm.
Okay.
"I'll be back," Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator. Super short, iconic rhythm, and that flat, determined tone.
Yeah, everyone knows that one.
Or maybe something like, "Why so serious?" Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight. Very unique, creepy intonation contour. Basically, look for lines that stick in your head not just because of the words, but because of how they were delivered.
Huh.
Find ones that you can almost hear in your head because they're so memorable phonetically.
Huh.
Those are often great candidates for shadowing practice.
That makes sense. Choose something that's already captured your attention with its sound. Okay, so we focused on listening deeply, and we're actively practicing copying with shadowing. What's the third core piece the source emphasizes for sounding more natural?
Okay. Part 3 is about expanding your natural vocabulary. And the key insight here, as the source makes very clear, is that this isn't just about learning more single words from a list.
Right.
It's about learning and, more importantly, using common real-life phrases and expressions. These are the chunks of language that native speakers use automatically without thinking. Integrating them makes you sound much more natural and fluent.
So it's moving beyond just saying maybe I understand you completely or I agree with your statement
Great.
to using the common ways native speakers express agreement in different kinds of situations.
Exactly that. The source provides some excellent examples for expressing agreement in different ways beyond just a simple, "I agree." They mention totally, exactly, and I couldn't agree more.
And as you noted earlier when we were talking about observation, these aren't always interchangeable, are they? There's nuance in how and when you use them.
Absolutely, and recognizing this nuance is really key to sounding natural, not awkward. Totally. Is very informal and usually quite enthusiastic. It's a strong agreement, typically used with friends or in very casual settings. You probably wouldn't drop a totally into a formal business presentation, it would likely sound jarring.
Right. Context matters.
Then exactly implies precise agreement. You're saying, yes, that is the precise point I was thinking, or you've articulated my thoughts perfectly. It signals alignment on a specific idea. It can be used in more formal or intellectual discussions as well as casually.
Okay, more precise.
And I couldn't agree more, is generally a stronger, often more emphatic way to agree. It signifies that you are in complete accord, 100% on the same page. It can be used in various contexts, including more formal ones, maybe to show really strong support or agreement with someone's opinion or statement.
So the context, who you're talking to, and the level of formality really dictate which phrase feels most appropriate.
Precisely. And the best way to learn this is to pay attention to who is speaking, where they are, and who they are talking to when you hear these phrases used in real life or in media. Other common ways to express agreement you might listen for include,
Like,
"That's so true," or maybe, "You got it," which often means you are absolutely correct or "That's the right answer." And a very informal one, "Tell me about it."
tell me about it.
Yeah.
Often implies you strongly agree because you've had a similar, maybe frustrating experience yourself, right?
Exactly. It signals shared experience or feeling.
The source also gives great examples for expressing uncertainty instead of just repeating, I don't know all the time.
Yes, this is crucial for sounding natural. When you genuinely don't know something, they suggest alternatives like, "I have no idea."
Yeah.
"I'm not sure, to be honest." And the very informal, "Beats me."
Okay. And again, I'm guessing there are distinct levels of formality and tone there too.
Definitely. "I have no idea." Often carries a sense of maybe surprise or emphatic lack of knowledge. It can sound a bit frustrated or bewildered depending on your tone of voice when you say it.
Right.
"I'm not sure, to be honest," is generally a polite and slightly softer way of admitting you don't know. Adding, "to be honest," often softens the statement and adds a touch of sincerity or thoughtfulness.
Okay, more gentle.
And then "beats me" is extremely informal and casual. It's used for something you really have no clue about, often something surprising or confusing. You would typically only use this with close friends or maybe family.
You definitely wouldn't use beats me if your boss asked you for the project update in a meeting.
Highly inadvisable. That would not go over well. Other common ways to express uncertainty that you might listen for include, "I'm not really sure," which is a good general purpose one. Or maybe "could be," which suggests something is a possibility but you're not certain. And a classic, very versatile phrase, "It depends."
It depends. A
Wow.
perfect answer for so many complex questions. So how do we go about learning these phrases effectively? It's not just about seeing a list in a textbook, right?
No, definitely not. The source's emphasis on observation is key here, too. You need to actively listen for these phrases being used in native speech, in movies, podcasts, conversations you overhear. But don't just notice the phrase itself. Notice the context in which it's used.
Okay.
Keep a dedicated list, maybe in a notebook or a digital file like Anki or Quizlet. But don't just write down the phrase like "beats me." Note who said it, to whom they said it, and in what situation. What was the conversation about? This helps you understand the appropriate usage, the register.
So you learn the phrase, but you also learn his social environment, essentially.
Exactly. Then the crucial step is to try to use them yourself. Use them in practice conversations, maybe incorporate them into your shadowing exercises, or even just when you're talking to yourself in English. Start small, pick just 1 or 2 new phrases a week, and make a conscious effort to integrate them where they fit naturally.
That makes sense. Learn it, understand its context, then actively try to use it. Are there other categories of natural phrases we should be listening for, even if the source didn't list them all out?
Oh, absolutely. Once you start tuning your ear to listen for these chunks of language, these common phrases, you'll find them everywhere. It's worth listening for common patterns in.
Like what?
Greetings and farewells. Go beyond just hello and goodbye. Listen for how people actually start and end casual conversations. Things like, "What's up? How's it going? How you doing? See ya. Talk to you later. Catch you later. Take care." Notice their rhythms and reductions too. See ya. Not see ya.
Okay, greetings and goodbyes.
Filler words and hesitations. Things like, well, so actually, right? Native speakers use these naturally to pause, think, connect ideas, or soften statements. Using them appropriately and in moderation can actually make you sound less rehearsed and more natural.
Interesting. So fillers aren't always bad.
Not necessarily. Used naturally, they are part of the flow. Then, common responses reactions. Listen for short, common ways people react to news or statements. Things like, "no way," for disbelief or surprise. Really, also for surprise. That's crazy. Oh my God. Or, oh my gosh, depending on context and speaker. Never mind. It's okay. Sounds good.
Got it. Reactions.
And also maybe agreeing to do something.
Yeah.
Simple confirmations like, all right, okay, sure thing. Sounds good. You got it. Will do.
Learning these phrases really feels like getting access to the real lived language, not just the textbook version.
They absolutely are. They're like the connective tissue, the conversational shortcuts, and the flavor of everyday English conversation. Mastering a good range of these adds a huge layer of naturalness to your speech.
Okay, this is great stuff. We've covered the observation, the copying with shadowing, and building this phraseology. Now for the warnings. Part 4 in the source is about avoiding common pitfalls.
Yes, the source is very practical here and lists a few critical mistakes that learners often make when they are consciously trying to sound more natural or more fluent. And the first major one it flags is speaking too fast.
Ah, mistaking speed for fluency. I can see how people would fall into that trap.
Exactly. The source gives a clear warning against this impulse. It feels intuitively like speaking faster must equal fluency, right? But doing so, especially before you've really mastered the subtle sounds, the rhythm, and the intonation patterns we've been talking about, is actually counterproductive.
Why is speaking too fast a pitfall then? What goes wrong?
Because, as the source implies, rushing your speech often leads to an increase in errors, pronunciation mistakes, mumbled or unclear articulation. It can also make you sound breathless, maybe nervous, or just plain difficult for the listener to follow. Natural native speech isn't just uniformly fast. It has varied speed. People slow down for emphasis, they pause for breath, they pause to let the listener process important points. The focus should really be on achieving clear, controlled speech with good rhythm and intonation, as we discussed earlier.
So prioritize smoothness and clarity over just raw speed.
Absolutely. It's far, far better to speak at a moderate, comfortable pace where your articulation is clear and your rhythm feels natural than it is to race ahead and end up stumbling over words or blending them together incorrectly. A good strategy is to actually practice speaking slowly first, really focusing on making the sounds correctly and hitting the right stresses clearly. Speed can gradually increase naturally as your confidence and your muscle memory develop over time.
Okay, slow down to speed up smoothly later. Makes sense. What's the next mistake the source cautions against?
Overusing slang. This is another common one. The source acknowledges that learning slang can be fun, and it can certainly help you understand more casual conversations and maybe sound more current in some situations. But it warns that using too much slang or using it incorrectly or in the wrong situation sounds very unnatural. It can actually make you harder to understand or even alienate listeners if it feels forced or inappropriate.
Like trying to force, yo bro, that's lit, into every single conversation, regardless of who you're talking to.
Precisely that kind of thing. This comes right back to the concept of register and appropriateness that we touched on when discussing phrases. Slang is highly context dependent. It's often tied to specific social groups, age groups, sometimes locations, and definitely specific situations.
Right.
Using very informal slang in a formal setting, like a job interview or maybe even a semi-formal situation like talking to a professor, demonstrates a lack of understanding of social context. It's like, well, shouting in a library, it just doesn't fit.
So the advice is to learn common slang, mainly by observing when and where and with whom native speakers actually use it.
Yes, observation is absolutely key again here. Pay close attention to the situation and the people involved. Who are they talking to when they use a certain slang term? Is it friends, family, colleagues? You generally wouldn't talk to your grandmother the way you talk to your closest friends, right?
Totally not.
And it's really important to remember, as the source implies, that having a broad vocabulary of standard English is much more versatile and useful across a wider range of situations than having an extensive slang vocabulary. Learn enough slang to understand others, definitely, and maybe use a few common, fairly mild terms appropriately in very specific casual contexts. But don't try to rely on it or overdo it. Focus on standard English first.
Okay, use slang sparingly and appropriately. Got it. What's the final crucial mistake highlighted by the source?
This one is perhaps the most critical pitfall of all because it really undermines all the other efforts not practicing out loud. The source points out, quite rightly, that many learners spend hours listening, reading, maybe doing grammar exercises, but they actively avoid the actual physical act of speaking English.
And just listening comprehension alone won't magically make you a fluent speaker.
Exactly, because speaking uses a completely different set of physical skills and coordination in your mouth, your tongue, your lips, your jaw, your vocal cords, even your breathing than listening or reading does. Your brain might understand the sounds and the structures perfectly well, but your mouth still needs the physical training to produce them smoothly and accurately.
It's like you can understand the instructions for doing push-ups perfectly. You can watch videos of people doing push-ups, but that won't build any muscle unless you actually get down and do the push-ups yourself.
That's a great analogy. You have to physically engage the muscles involved. So how can you practice speaking out loud, especially if you don't have regular speaking partners readily available?
Yeah, what can you do?
Well, the source's emphasis on active practice implies you need to actively create opportunities, even if it's just by yourself. Practice alone. Read things aloud, articles, news stories, maybe chapters from a book you're reading. And the point isn't just to read the words silently in your head, but to practice actually saying them with appropriate intonation, rhythm, and trying to link words naturally.
Okay, reading aloud is one way.
Another is to summarize things you've read or watched in English out loud. Tell yourself what the main points were, or just talk to yourself in English throughout the day. Narrate your actions as you do them. Okay, I'm going to make a cup of tea. First, I need to boil the water. Describe things you see around you. Express your thoughts or opinions on a topic out loud to yourself.
Talking to yourself in English sounds a bit strange, but I can see how it would provide practice.
It absolutely does. And remember, the shadowing technique we discussed earlier is a powerful form of speaking practice, too, because it forces you to actively produce native-like sounds and rhythms. The key is just making noise in English.
So consistent, active, spoken practice is basically non-negotiable if you want to improve your fluency.
Yes, absolutely. Even short, regular bursts of speaking practice, 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, are far more effective than trying to do one long, infrequent session. Make noise in English every day.
Okay, that's a clear message.
Hmm.
We've broken down the techniques, observation, shadowing, phrases, and the pitfalls to avoid. Let's move to part 5 now, which the source touches on. The broader cultural context and how your speech is actually perceived by others.
Right. This brings us right back full circle to the initial points we made about tone and intonation. The source correctly notes that how you speak English, the musicality, the prosody, significantly influences how you are perceived by native speakers, particularly in English-speaking cultures.
Yeah.
And these perceptions relate to things like your perceived confidence, your friendliness, your level of interest, maybe even your competence.
And this is where getting the music of the language right makes a huge difference, going beyond just being grammatically understood.
Absolutely. As the source implies, speaking with a very flat, monotonous voice, even if your grammar and vocabulary are perfectly correct, can inadvertently signal things you don't intend. It might make you seem disinterested or bored or lacking in confidence. In some contexts, it could even come across as less friendly or less engaged than you actually feel.
Yeah, imagine asking someone, "How are you?" with completely flat intonation and a totally neutral tone. Even though the words are polite, it could feel dismissive or cold.
Exactly. Whereas using a warmer tone, appropriate pitch variation, and a dynamic intonation pattern can make your communication much more pleasant, much more effective, and help you build stronger connections with people.
It makes you seem more approachable, more engaged.
Precisely. These vocal features, the tone, the rhythm, the intonation, they signal engagement, enthusiasm, sincerity, confidence. Getting the melody right makes your communication not just correct, but actually effective and pleasant to listen to.
The source also touches briefly on regional variations, doesn't it? It specifically mentions American English reductions like gonna and wanna, and how learning these helps you blend in more.
It does, and this highlights an important point. The specific sound features, the common reductions, the typical intonation patterns you're listening for will differ depending on the accent or variety of English you're focusing on.
So the techniques apply universally, but the target sounds change.
Precisely. While the principles of observing tone, rhythm, connected speech, and then shadowing them apply to learning any variety of English, the specific manifestations will vary. The source leans heavily on American English examples gonna, wanna, kinda, gotta, watcha, which makes sense as American English is a very common focus for learners worldwide. But if your goal was, say, to sound more like a speaker of British English, received pronunciation, or maybe a regional UK accent, or Australian English, you would need to listen specifically for their characteristic patterns of linking, their common vowel reductions, which might be different, and their typical intonation contours. For instance, the vowel sound in a word like water or bath is famously different. And the rhythm and intonation in questions and statements can also have distinct patterns between, say, London English and California English.
So the core method remains the same. Observe closely and copy accurately the native speakers of the specific accent you want to emulate or the one you hear most often.
Exactly. Choose your model or models and focus your listening and shadowing practice on them.
Now, it sounds like the overall goal here is achieving naturalness and effective communication, but maybe not necessarily erasing your own identity or your native accent entirely.
That's a really crucial point and something the source subtly touches on when it talks about confidence and sounding like yourself. The goal isn't necessarily, for most people, to sound completely indistinguishable from a specific native speaker from a specific place, thereby losing all trace of your own linguistic background.
Right.
The aim is more about gaining the tools, the accurate pronunciation of key sounds, the natural rhythms and stress patterns, the appropriate intonation, the common phrases that allow you to communicate clearly, comfortably, and confidently in English. Your background and your unique voice are part of who you are.
So it's about adding skills, not subtracting identity.
Exactly. The techniques we've discussed are about adding layers of naturalness and effectiveness to your spoken English. They help you sound more fluent and more comfortable as you, rather than trying to become a perfect phonetic clone of someone else. It's ultimately about being perceived accurately and positively because your spoken English flows naturally and clearly.
This has been a really, really deep dive into the practicalities of sounding more natural. How do we bring it all together now? What are the absolute key takeaways?
Okay, let's recap the core strategies that the source material lays out and that we've explored in more detail. First, dedicated observation, really training your ear to hear beyond just the words, focusing specifically on the tone, the intonation patterns, the rhythm, especially that stress timing and the schwa sound, and all that connected speech, the linking, the reductions like gonna, wanna, watcha.
Okay, observe the music.
Second, active copying, primarily using the shadowing method. This is about building the physical muscle memory for producing these sounds and rhythms by mimicking native speakers accurately.
Copy the music. Got it.
Third, actively learning and using natural phrases and expressions, moving beyond just single vocabulary words to adopting the common chunks of language that native speakers use, and crucially, understanding their appropriate context and register.
Learn the common tunes, the riffs.
Nice analogy. And fourth, being acutely aware of and actively avoiding those common pitfalls we discussed. Speaking too fast before you're ready, overusing or misusing slang, and most importantly, neglecting to practice speaking out loud regularly.
Avoid the mistakes.
Okay.
And the source doesn't just give us information, it gives us a concrete challenge, right? Something practical to do.
Yes, it does. It presents a clear action plan for you, the listener, to try out this week. Step 1, choose a short English video or podcast clip that you like, maybe just a minute or two long.
Okay.
Step 2, select just one sentence from that clip and really practice shadowing it. Use the steps, listen carefully, pause, repeat, trying to match exactly, and then try speaking at the same time as the native speaker, focusing intensely on matching their sound, their rhythm, their intonation.
Just one sentence, shadowed well.
Exactly. Quality over quantity here. Step 3, make a conscious effort sometime this week to use one new natural phrase or expression that you learned about today, maybe one of the ways to agree, or one way to express uncertainty, or even just a common greeting or farewell. Try using it in a real conversation if you can, or even just in a practice conversation or when talking to yourself.
That's a really practical, manageable way to start integrating these techniques immediately.
It is, and the source also encourages engagement, asking you to think about and maybe share who is your favorite English speaker to learn from? Whose voice or rhythm or way of phrasing things do you particularly admire?
Yeah.
Pay attention to how they speak, not just what they say, and let that inspire your own observation and your shadowing practice. Find your own models.
We'd genuinely love to hear about that if you want to share.
Yeah.
And the source also gives us a little hint about where we're headed next time.
It does. It sets up the next deep dive perfectly. It builds directly on that critical need for speaking practice that we discussed today by promising to focus specifically on how to practice speaking English effectively when you are practicing alone.
Excellent. That sounds like a really useful follow-up. So maybe as a final thought to leave you with today, becoming a more natural, more confident English speaker doesn't necessarily require a plane ticket or moving abroad.
No. It requires focused, dedicated effort right where you are, applying the specific techniques we've discussed, training your ear to the real music of the language, training your mouth to produce it through active copying and shadowing, and consciously building your repertoire of natural, everyday phrases.
And that consistent, deliberate practice, even if it's just for a few minutes each day, applying these strategies can fundamentally change how you hear English and how you speak it. It can make you sound clearer, more natural, and feel much more confident.
Absolutely. So the challenge is to start listening differently, starting today. Tune into the rhythm, the melody, the connections.
And don't be afraid to start mimicking what you hear.
That's the key. Get those vocal muscles working.
Until next time, keep observing, keep practicing, and really enjoy the process of finding your most natural voice in English.